I'm Roy from Roy's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2018 Toyota Sienna van, 3.5 liter automatic. I'm going to show you how to replace the water pump, the thermostat with housing, and the serpentine belt. These are the tools I'm going to be using today to do this job. Pry bar, 1/2 inch pipe I'll use as an extension for my 3/8 ratchet. 1/4 inch air ratchet, 3/8 air ratchet, 3/8 ratchet, 3/8 extension, 14mm socket, another 14mm socket, 12mm socket, 10mm socket, 1/4 inch ratchet, 1/4 inch extension, 12mm socket, 10mm socket, and another 10mm socket, a 19mm wrench, 14mm wrench, 16mm wrench, 14mm wrench. This is a 14mm gear wrench, 12 and a 10mm wrench, 10mm wrench, plier, my gear wrench to remove and replace the serpentine belt, 1/2 inch impact, 21mm socket, flat tip screwdriver, another flat tip screwdriver. This is a 10mm screwdriver type wrench, vice grip, my airlift tool to install the coolant, anti-seize, heavy duty silicone spray, and some dielectric grease. These are the parts I'm going to be using today to do this job. This is a brand new water pump and a thermostat housing with thermostat. I got both of this from the Toyota dealer. I'm going to be replacing the serpentine belt. I'll be using this brand Bando, part number 6PK1560, and some pre-mixed antifreeze pink extended life. Okay, so we're under the vehicle. Now I'm going to be removing this plastic piece right here. So I'm going to be draining the radiator. So I'm going to be opening up this drain plug. So now I'm going to be opening up my radiator cap. Okay, so while it's draining, we're going to be removing this cover right here. Just pull it up. Okay, so we're going to be removing this upper mount right here. So I'm going to be removing this mount that bolts to the engine. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts we got to remove. So I'm going to be removing this bracket right here. So we're gonna have to be removing this bracket right here. I think there's 1, 2, 3. There's another one right here. 4 bolts that I gotta remove. Then I can take off this bracket. Okay, one more bolt down here. Okay, there's a metal bracket under here. We got to remove. The wire is tie strapped to the bracket, so I got to remove that. Okay. So I'm going to take it off this hose. We're going to be removing the lower hose from the thermostat housing. So we're going to be removing this housing. So we're going to be disconnecting this wire. So before we remove the serpentine belt, you need to loosen these 4 bolts that bolt the pulley onto the water pump. Just loosen it up for now. I'm going to be removing the passenger front tire. So I'm going to be removing this plastic piece. Remove this bolt. And then remove this retainer. Just push it in and then pop it out. So now we're going to go underneath and we're going to loosen up the tensioner to remove the serpentine belt. So we're on the passenger side front inner fender well. I'm going to be loosening the automatic tensioner. So I'm going to have to turn it like that and then take the belt off. Okay, so I'm going to be removing this idler pulley because part of the water pump is behind the pulley. Okay, so now I'm going to be removing the water pump pulley. What we're going to have to do is jack the motor up. so I can get this pulley out. So we're going to be removing this nut from the motor mount, and I'm going to be jacking up the motor. So I'm going to be jacking up the passenger side of the engine with my bottle jack. So we're going to be removing the S-belt tensioner pulley only, because part of the pump is behind the pulley. So on this one is left-hand tread. So in order to remove it, you're going to have to turn this bolt clockwise. Okay, so I'm going to be removing the water pump. There's a whole bunch of bolts, 10 millimeter and 12 millimeter bolts. You just got to remove all the bolts and then take the water pump out. So I'm just loosening up the bolts right now. And then later on I'm going to use my air ratchet to remove it. Okay, so I'm going to be removing my bolts with a 3/8 air ratchet. So what I like to do is I like to put these bolts back into the new water pump for now, because some bolts might be longer than others. Okay, so I'm going to be prying the water pump off and then remove the gasket. Okay, so we're going to be cleaning up the block side. So we're cleaning all these bolt holes with some brake clean. And we're going to dry it up. I'm going to be putting anti-seize on my bolts. Now we're going to be putting it on. Okay, so now we're tightening it all down. So I'm going to be putting on this water pump pulley, putting some anti-seize on my bolt. So we're going to be tightening up these bolts the best you can for now. Because after you put on the serpentine belt, then you can tighten these bolts all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on this tensioner pulley. So this is the left-hand tread. It's backwards. Okay, so we're going to be putting on the idler pulley. Okay, so we're going to be putting on the serpentine belt. Okay, now I got the serpentine belt on. Now I can final tighten the water pump bolt pulley. Okay, so now I'm going to be putting on my thermostat housing with thermostat. Now we're going to be bolting it up. Putting some anti-seize on my bolts. So we got to put the nut on the stud. Put a little anti-seize on this stud. Okay, so we're going to be tightening down the 3 bolts that hold the thermostat on. I'm going to be connecting my lower hose to the thermostat housing. So I'm going to be spraying some silicone spray to make it slip on easier. So now we're going to be putting on this bypass hose. Okay, so I lowered the engine. So I'm going to be connecting my electrical connector. I'm going to be putting in some dielectric grease and plugging it in. So I'm going to be installing my mount. So we'll be tightening down the mount. I'm going to be putting on the bracket that holds on the wire. So I'm going to be putting some anti-seize on my bolts. Bolting it up. Putting some anti-seize on these studs. Putting some on my bolt. With this bracket. Okay, so we're going to be tightening up the mount. So I'm going to be tightening up the motor mount. Putting some anti-seize on the bolt. And the retainer. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on my tire. With my pry bar, I'm going to lift up the tire. So I'm going to be tightening up my wheel. So I'm going to be putting on this plastic panel. So I'm going to be vacuuming out the cooling system. So I'm going to be installing my airlift tool. So I'm going to be pinching off this return line. Okay, so I'm going to be connecting my air hose. So we're going to be drawing a vacuum. You notice the hose is getting squished. We're pulling a vacuum about 15-16 inches. Okay, so that should be good enough. Okay, so now I'll be opening up the valve. Now it's going to be vacuuming in the antifreeze. It's going to go in really fast. So before it even gets empty, you got to shut it off. You don't want it sucking air. Transfer it to the next bottle. Open up the valve. Okay, so that should be good. Okay, so we're going to be removing my airlift tool. So I'm going to be topping off the antifreeze. Putting on a new radiator cap. Topping off my coolant recovery tank. So we're going to start up the vehicle and run it through the heat cycle. Oh, but before we start them up, we're going to be putting on that plastic cover. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on the cover. So I'm going to be starting up the vehicle. Okay, sounds really smooth. So we're going to let it run through the heat cycle. Let the fan go on and off about 3 times. Then we're going to road test the vehicle, come back, let it cool off, top off the antifreeze, and good to go. So that's how you replace a water pump, thermostat with housing, and a serpentine belt. If you have any questions, comment below. Make sure you subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I see you in the next video. Aloha.